Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today. We are about to open up one of the oldest, most epic narratives ever written. Welcome to this storybook explainer where we're going to explore the ultimate beginnings of, well, absolutely everything. We're talking about the Genesis story, the creation of the whole world, a perfect garden called Eden, and the very first choices ever made by humanity. So let's dive right into this.
Right off the bat, I want you to use your imagination for a second. If you had to build a whole world, where would you even begin? Imagine having absolutely nothing. No Legos, no clay, no tools. Just a blank, completely empty space. How do you make an entire universe from scratch? That is exactly the massive question our story answers right on page 1.
All right, setting the stage with Section 1, the ultimate blank canvas.
To really get how epic this is, we have to start at the true beginning. Before the mountains, before the oceans, before even light itself existed, there was just this ultimate blank canvas. We're talking about a cosmic scale here, something so big it's almost impossible to wrap our heads around. Let's look at this dramatic contrast. At first, the text tells us the earth was without form and void, just completely covered in pitch-black darkness. But then the Spirit of God hovered over the waters and literally everything changed. From that dark, empty void, we get the heavens, the earth, brilliant light, and vibrant, breathing life. It is, without a doubt, the biggest transformation you could ever imagine.
Which leads us into Section 2, 6 days of making.
Now, a transformation this huge didn't just happen all at once in some messy jumble. God organized this massive construction project into a very specific, step-by-step timeline. And he literally just speaks things into existence. On day 1, he says, "Let there be light," dividing the day from the night. Day 2, he creates the firmament. Day 3, dry land appears, and boom, grass, herbs, and fruit trees just sprout up everywhere. Day 4 brings the sun, the moon, and the stars to rule the sky. Day 5 completely fills the world with huge sea creatures and birds. And finally, on day 6, God creates all the land animals, and then his ultimate creation, humans. Made directly in his own image, male and female, blessed to multiply and have dominion over the earth. And God looked at all of this and said it was very good.
I actually want to pause on a really cool word from day 2, the firmament. Imagine the firmament as this giant cosmic ceiling that divided the waters. And when God gathered the waters below together to make the seas on day 3, think of it like filling up the absolute biggest swimming pools in the entire universe. God was perfectly setting the stage for life.
After 6 days of non-stop universe-building action, we land on the number 7. On the 7th day, this grand construction project was finally finished. God ended his work and he rested. But he didn't just take a quick nap. The text says he blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, making it a super special, holy day of rest.
Let's move on to Section 3, life in God's garden.
So let's zoom way in from that giant spinning cosmos down to one specific perfect home, Eden. God planted a garden eastward and put the man he formed from the dust right there to live in it. And wow, what a home it was! God made every tree that was beautiful to look at and good for food. Right in the middle were 2 very important trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A massive river actually flowed right out of Eden to water the garden, and it parted into 4 famous rivers, Pishon, Gihon, Hiddekel, and Euphrates. And it wasn't just dirt and plants either. There were precious materials there too, like pure gold, fragrant bdellium, and beautiful onyx stones. It was an absolute paradise.
Now, I have a fun question for you. If you had to name every single animal on Earth, like every giant sea creature, every creeping bug, every massive bear, what would you call them? This brilliantly illustrates the really big job God gave the first man, Adam. God brought all the beasts and birds to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called them, that officially became their name.
But even with all those amazing animals around, Adam was still alone. There just wasn't a helper quite right for him. So God put Adam into a deep sleep, took one of his ribs, and created woman. When God brought her to Adam, he was overjoyed. He said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." They were perfectly matched. The text tells us they lived together in the garden, totally naked and completely unashamed. Everything was absolutely perfect.
Okay, here is where things get tense. Section 4, the tricky serpent.
Every great story has a moment where things go a little sideways. We're about to meet the villain of our storybook arc. Enter the serpent. The
The text tells us the serpent was more cunning, more sneaky than any other beast. He slithers right up to the woman and asks this exact question. Has God indeed said, "You shall not eat of every tree of the garden"? Do you see what he's doing there? God gave them just one rule. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or they would die. The serpent is planting a tiny little seed of doubt.
And then the serpent straight up lies. He tells her, "You will not surely die." Instead, he promises that if she eats the fruit, her eyes will be opened, and she will be just like God, knowing good and evil. Let me ask you this. If someone promised you all the knowledge in the world and said you'd be like God, would you listen to the tricky serpent? It is a huge test.
Let's watch how this unfolds step by step. One single choice breaks the only rule in the entire garden. Step 1. Eve sees the tree is good for food and desirable to make one wise. Step 2. She takes the fruit and eats. Step 3. She gives some to her husband Adam and he eats too. Instantly, step 4, their eyes are opened exactly like the serpent said. But here's the catch for step 5. They don't feel like gods at all. Instead, they suddenly realize they're naked and they just feel totally ashamed.
They quickly sew fig leaves together to cover themselves up, and then they hear the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. This right here is the ultimate uh-oh moment. Have you ever broken a rule and just tried to completely hide when you heard a parent grumbling? That is exactly what Adam and Eve did. They literally tried to hide from the creator of the universe behind some trees.
Which brings us to our final part. Section 5, the big consequence.
When God calls out to them, Adam admits he hid because he was afraid. God instantly knows why. The perfect paradise is broken. What happens next is basically the oldest blame game in history. Watch this. God asks Adam what he did. Adam points right at his wife and says, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree." He blames her and kinda blames God too. Then God asks the woman what she's done. She points right down and says, "The serpent deceived me." Nobody wants to take the heat.
Because of their choices, God hands down some very serious consequences directly matching what they did. The serpent is cursed to crawl on its belly and eat dust, and there will forever be enmity, a bitter feud between the serpent and the woman's offspring. For the woman, God greatly multiplies her sorrow and pain in having children. And for the man, the very ground he was made from is cursed. Instead of living in a perfect garden, Adam will have to work through thorns and thistles, sweating to grow food until the day he dies and returns to the dust.
But, even in the middle of all this really heavy stuff, there is a look toward the future. Adam gives his wife a new name. He calls her Eve. Why? Because as the text says, she was to become the mother of all living. Humanity is going to continue and multiply, just as God originally planned.
And here's a really beautiful detail. Those scratchy fig leaves Adam and Eve sewed together, yeah, they definitely weren't going to cut it. So God himself made them tunics out of animal skin. Even though they broke the biggest rule and had to face the consequences, God still cared for them and made sure they were properly clothed and protected.
But they couldn't stay in paradise anymore. God noted that humanity now knew good and evil, and he couldn't let them eat from the tree of life and live forever in their fallen state. So we get this incredibly dramatic final scene. God drives Adam and Eve out of the garden to farm the tough ground, and to make absolutely sure they can never return, he places powerful cherubim, angelic beings at the east of Eden, along with a terrifying flaming sword that turns in every single direction just to guard the path back to the tree of life. And that is exactly where this incredible beginning narrative leaves us. The perfect world they were handed was lost through a single choice. They're out in the wild, dusty world, having to really work for their survival. So, I leave you with this to think about. With the gates of Eden permanently closed and this new, fallen humanity entering the wider world, what happens next? How is the story of mankind gonna unfold from here? Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer today. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.